Hey guys, Danny here. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are looking at yet another e-bike. This product was sent to me for free for review, so please bear that in mind. So this is a mid-drive e-bike. It is using a Ananda 250 watt brushless mid-drive motor. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's using 27.5 inch tires. It has a 9-speed Shimano gear system. It has front and rear Tektro hydraulic disc brakes. It's using a 36 volt 9.2 amp hour Samsung cell battery. It's limited to 25 kilometers an hour, and they say it has a max mileage of 260 kilometers, which it obviously won't, but we'll talk about that a bit more later. And the bike has a total weight of 25.6 kilos. Now you'll notice here it doesn't have any suspension whatsoever, which to me was very confusing considering the cost of this bike. Even if you're going to be using this for just on road and not doing any off-roading at all, not having any suspension is something you're going to feel for sure. And I'll also add that the seat is very thin and not really that comfortable. So when you add this all up, this isn't the most comfortable bike to ride, and I really wish they would have either added a much more comfortable seat with some suspension in the seat, or just some suspension on the bike. This bike does feel a lot more maneuverable and lighter than some of the other bikes, and has a much more traditional look compared to all of ENGWE's other bikes, which I do like. As I said earlier, this bike is using a 19.2 amp hour Samsung cell, which is very nice, as a lot of people seem to recommend the Samsung cells online when purchasing an electric bike. Here's the first weird design decision, which is the placement of the rear light, which blocks the removal of the battery. A minor inconvenience, but I'll talk about the light a bit more in a second. The battery is locked in place, so you do have to use the key to lock it in and to unlock it to take it out, and you can charge the battery while it's in the bike, like pretty much all of ENGWE's other bikes that I've reviewed. The locking mechanism feels a little bit weird. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it feels like you really have to give it a good push for the battery to lock into place. It's not really my favorite lock I've seen on their bikes. It just feels a little bit finicky and hard to use. Maybe I'll get used to it and I'm actually doing it wrong. I'm not sure. ENGWE mentioned in their product page that they have an integrated lighting system. They do for the front light, but the back light is a cheap, smaller light that is attached in the seat. It just seems weird going from having this nice inbuilt front light to this cheap feeling and looking rear light, which, while it does the job, as I said, it just feels kind of cheap, and it pushes into the underside of the seat, which it doesn't really feel that secure, and it just doesn't really feel like a good high-end solution for a bike like this. And for its cost, I just feel like we should have got an inbuilt rear light like we have in the other ENGWE bikes that you simply just screw on. While we're on the subject of some negative points for this bike, I also want to mention the really bad screen they've included on this bike. And it's mainly bad because it just really doesn't have any brightness, especially when you're outside in sunlight. And then second, being so small, I just didn't really enjoy using it as much as the screens on pretty much every other ENGWE bike that I've reviewed so far. Now, it does have a little bit of a better customization menu, but you can't really adjust the power levels. So for me, I didn't really find it that interesting. This is something I think all e-bikes should come with, because it just makes them much more enjoyable to use, and it would make them easier to recommend if you can customize them to your own liking. I also need to mention there is no way of unlocking the speed on this bike. I even messaged ENGWE and asked them, but it is restricted to 25 kilometers an hour, and as far as I'm aware, there's no way you can change it without some actual modifications to the bike. You would probably have noticed I haven't mentioned a throttle, as this bike doesn't have one. Unfortunately, it only has this mode called walk mode, which will just push the bike forwards at an incredibly slow pace, which I found pretty much useless. Despite some of the weird design choices on this bike, it might sound like I don't like this bike, but that isn't the case. My feelings have been a little bit mixed while reviewing it, but I have to say it has grown on me quite a bit. as most of the things I've mentioned, none of them are deal breakers. So for example, the screen is not something you need to use all the time when you're riding. You don't really necessarily need to have a super bright screen. You can see it while you're riding around. It's not impossible to use, it's just not great to use. The same with the suspension system. So having no front, rear or seat suspension does add to the discomfort of riding this bike over bumps, but it doesn't make it bad to ride. It just is something you are going to notice if you have used bikes that have front or full suspension systems. It doesn't make it unpleasant to use or bad. It just feels like a feature that really should be there, but it's not. I did mention the seat being uncomfortable, and I do think compared to most seats that I've used, it is. I did find that the longer I rode the bike, I did get more used to using the seat, but it just seems like in general it needs to be a little bit thicker and have a bit more padding. I have seen bikes in the past that use this kind of slimmer seat, and I guess maybe one of the advantages of it is you do feel more seated on it and you don't really move around as much. Easily coming in 5 kilos or more lighter than some of ENGWE's other bikes. I have to say, for just riding around with no pedal assist or no throttle, if I had to choose, this would be the bike I would use, as it feels a lot lighter and feels much more like a traditional bike. I definitely enjoyed pedaling around and cruising around on this bike much more than other electric bikes that I've used so far. The torque sensor was very responsive. As soon as you start pedaling, you feel it kick in, and it does feel pretty sensitive, so it will match your input very closely. I just wish you was able to unlock this bike to get some more speed and power out of it. However, as this bike is trying to be very compliant with all the laws, you can still get it up to a high speed by just pedaling yourself, but you will feel the pedal assist disengage pretty quickly as you start to pedal hard on this bike, which is quite disappointing. I really wish you could unlock the speed, but this could just be a personal preference to me. While at first I really did miss having a throttle, I did quite quickly get used to not having one, and even quite enjoyed just riding around using the bike's pedal assist. As I said, the torque sensor is very quick to sense your pedaling and kick in the pedal assist. So what I was doing quite a bit was just leaving the bike in the highest gear, and even if you come to a full stop, it's quite hard to pull away obviously in that gear, but the pedal assist and the torque sensor, they work together really well, and they sense that you're pedaling as soon as you push that pedal, and you will get some pedal assist, so it makes pulling away in higher gears a lot more feasible. One upside to having a mid-drive bike is you do get more efficiency, and you can utilize all of the gears because the unit is driving the chain and it's not driving the wheel directly. So a hub motor will usually be on the back wheel and drive the wheel directly, but a mid-drive actually sits where the chain is in the middle of the bike and drives the chain, which drives the back wheel. This has some advantages and some disadvantages too, but the main thing is going to be efficiency and utilization of all your gears. Now, I've seen some other reviewers do some pretty crazy range tests on this bike, and one guy was able to get 72 kilometers in really bad cold conditions. So if range is your thing, I think this is going to be the way to go for all of ENGWE's bikes. Another bit of feedback for this bike I would have is I would have hoped for the Shimano gear system to just feel a little bit more high-end than it does. So for the vast majority of the time it felt great, but there was a few occasions where I felt like it hanged and it wouldn't go into gear without me pressing the button again, and then it would immediately go in. As I said, the vast majority of the time it was fine, but there were just a few occasions where it felt a little bit clunky. Also, I don't think this bike has a gear sensor, so what I mean by that is if you try and change gear while the pedal assist is going, it puts a lot of strain on the chain and the gear system, which I don't think you're supposed to do. So you do have to baby this bike a little bit more when you're using the pedal assist. You have to stop pedaling and then change gear. This does take a little bit of getting used to, and there was one particular time where it felt like the gear system did not like me changing gear while pedal assist was on. So what are my final thoughts on this bike? I think this bike, if ridden by the right person, would be a very great purchase, and what I mean by that is if range and a more traditional looking and feeling bike is what you're looking for, this is definitely going to be with you. If, of course, some of the downsides that I've mentioned, which I don't feel like are deal breakers, if those aren't deal breakers to you yourself, then I think this is a good purchase. And the price, I would say, is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's cheap or really expensive. I would say it's somewhere in the middle. At first, I did miss having the throttle and that kind of crazy fun feeling you get on some of ENGWE's other bikes. But as I said, this bike did grow on me, and it did remind me of when I was younger, riding around a more traditional looking and feeling bike. And it felt more like I was riding a bike rather than a motorcycle. So it did definitely grow on me in that way. But please let me know down below, is this bike appealing to you? Are any of the downsides I've mentioned, are they downsides? Do you agree with me? Does this bike need suspension, or does it not really matter? So I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, please give it a like. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe for more videos like this one. And of course, I will see you in the next one.